and really glad you're here this evening. It's my absolute delight to welcome Professor Morgan Luker, who is an associate professor of music at Reed College. And he's also the director of tango for musicians at Reed. As an ethnomusicologist, he holds a PhD from Columbia University, and his research focuses on the contemporary tango music of Buenos Aires, Argentina, and he is the author of The Tango Machine, published by the University of Chicago Press, which explores how contemporary tango music is used as a resource for social and economic development in Argentina, drawing upon his extensive fieldwork with tango musicians, musical industry figures, and cultural policymakers in Buenos Aires. I think I think we're all feeling a little FOMO now. want to have been with you there.
I love your giggle. I love your laugh.
It was fun, yeah.
So Professor Luker's work on these topics has appeared in numerous academic journals as well, and he's also presented his work at conferences throughout the US, Latin America, and Europe. And at Reed, Professor Luker teaches a wide variety of topics in world music and culture, but tonight he's here to talk to us about some of the traditional folkways and musics in Argentina. And so I thought we would just start off with the tango. And if you can tell us, what is it in layman's terms that makes something a tango? What is it that defines that style of music for you?
That's a great question. Thank you. I'll start by saying also just thanks everybody for being here. Thanks to Kerith for the invitation. It's an exciting opportunity for me to get to present some of what I work on to general audiences. I know you all are going to be having Argentine music as part of upcoming services and things like that. So hopefully this will help contextualize some of what you're going to encounter there and just, learn a little bit about this world, which is so rich and diverse and interesting in lots of ways. The question about what makes a tango is like, what are the key things that people talk about with this genre? And there's lots of different ways to answer it. I mean, I think the simple way to answer it, there's at least two ways to answer it. One is a musical one, which is that tango as a musical genre is defined in part by a set of kind of rhythmic accompaniment patterns that are used in different ways and kind of mixed together over the course of a given performance. This is different from some things like a lot of Latin American popular music genres have like specific beats like the clave and salsa or the samba beat and samba. Tango doesn't have a specific beat. It has these kind of accompaniment patterns that are used in different ways. If you have that plus a kind of melodic interpretation that moves between like legato and staccato styles in this very specific stylistic way, those are the main features of it musically. Okay, I know that's like a music theory answer to that. The other answer to what makes tango is it is whatever people dance tango to. And tango, like most popular music genres from Latin America, is both like a music culture and a dance culture and a culture of language and poetry and lyrics and things like that. Contemporary tango dancers will dance the tango moves, which is a set repertoire and a relationship between a leader and a follower, but they'll actually dance it to basically any kind of music at all. So that's interesting, where some of the things that define tango musically are not what define it vis-a-vis dance today.
That's really interesting. So on Friday night, we're going to have before services some dancers who will be joining us, and they're going to do a little exposition of the dancing. And then for anyone who's interested, they're going to teach a little bit. Oh, so for those of you who are interested, you have the opportunity to come and really experience that either visually or if you're feeling adventurous to try it out and to really experience what that feels like in the body as well. So should be a fun experience for those of you who are interested. So can you tell us a little bit about some of your favorite practitioners, maybe just share a little bit about both the kind of classic tango practitioners? Any favorites there? But also, what would you suggest that someone who doesn't know anything about this genre listen to in terms of contemporary tango?
Yeah, okay, that's a great question too. I'll start with the second part of it. I mean, the main, and I have some videos we can play if we get to them, or if people would like some examples. A lot of people's kind of gateway into tango music is this composer named Astor Piazzolla. And I can put this in the chat or something later, and I'm always happy to send people references. But he was a bandoneon player and composer. He died in 1992. He's kind of been canonized as almost like a classical music composer now, like orchestras will play some of his work and things like that. His music is really exciting, really diverse rhythmically, very kind of over the top in terms of melodic gestures, just going big the whole time. And it's a lot of people, for whatever reason, if you listen to jazz or you listen to classical music or you're just interested in international music, people come across him and notice when they hear him. And it's very, very exciting. And that he's just the tip.
Yeah. Can you explain to, because I'm guessing, I mean, I am lucky to know what a bandoneon is. And I went through a period of being obsessed with Astor Piazzolla, but I bet a lot of people on this Zoom don't know what that instrument is. Can you share with them what it is? Thanks.
Yeah, sure. And then I'll play some examples too that I think will help. I have like some videos that will show what people are doing. So the bandoneon is, yes, it's something that most people have never heard of. It is like the typical, one of several typical tango instruments, but it's kind of the iconic tango instrument in the way that like the saxophone is like the iconic jazz instrument, even though there's lots of instruments that play jazz. The bandoneon is, organologically is a concertina, basically, which means it's a button squeeze box instrument. You may hear it and think it's an accordion. It has a similar reedy timbre as like an accordion. An accordion is different because an accordion has a piano keyboard on one side and then buttons on the other side that play chords. If you hold down a single button, it will play like a major chord or a minor chord. The bandoneon, like a concertina, and Kerith, you know this from Irish music and stuff like this, has single buttons where each button just plays a single pitch. And so if you're going to play a chord, you have to hold down multiple buttons. It has different keyboards on either side. It's famously difficult to play. The keys are arranged in a very idiosyncratic way. I tell my students, it's like the bandoneon keyboard, it's not like from low to high or organized like a piano keyboard. It's more like a computer keyboard that has a kind of logic to it, but it's not obvious what that logic is when you're a user. And they're different on both sides, and it's different going out and going in. So it gets very complicated, famously complicated very quickly. But it's like the typical tango instrument and the timbre of tango, that and strings. That you'll hear in lots of different ways and still being played a lot. So I could say more about that, but I think I'll share a video with you all just to give you a sense of what this looks like and sounds like. And it'll also get back to your initial question, Kerith, of like classic figures versus contemporary figures. Because the first thing I'm going to play, I'm just going to play a short excerpt. And again, I'm happy to share this later if people want to return to it on your own. This is a piece from by the band. It's basically a tango big band that's led by this guy Aníbal Troilo, who is like one of the famous mid-century golden age figures of tango music. And this is a more classic tango style, though this is from a film that was made in 1974, actually just the year before Troilo died. But you'll see and hear what classic tango and the bandoneon in particular looks like. I'm going to pull this up for the sharing screen, and it should work if I go like this. Sorry to be talking to myself, everybody. I'm going to pull this up, and just a few moments of this so you can see and hear what it sounds like. That's the bandoneon. That's true. Okay, I'm gonna pause it there just for the sake of time. It's hard to stop because it's so great.
That's beautiful.
Yeah, thank you.
Yes, it's wonderful. It's wonderful. It's, you know, it's interesting even to see in the way that that they're sitting and arranged. There's definitely an influence of Western classical music, right?
Yeah, classical music and also just kind of like, concert popular music in general, right? These are like the equivalent of, like jazz big bands that were elegant, right? They're all wearing tuxedos. They were all playing in like, fancy nightclubs. They were, massive scale participatory popular culture. This is dance music too, right? Not just listening music. But also refined to the point of being able to think of it as classical music. I'll just quickly say here too, you can hear, it goes by really quick, but you can hear these rhythmic moments, really choppy articulations, and then long legato melodies and going back and forth. There's a lot going on with tango, and that's what I was saying musically, how it works a little bit.
Wonderful.
I don't know, someone has a hand. I'm happy to address that. Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing this. You're so gifted. Do they play this type of tango at a wedding dance?
At a wedding dance?
A wedding dance for the bride and groom. That sounds like that would be very, very exciting.
Yeah, I mean, tango, it's not necessarily like wedding music, but this is the kind of music you'll hear if you go to like what's called a milonga, but which is like a tango social dance where people go. I mean, Kerith, you're saying people will have a demonstration of this, at your services this weekend.
Husband and wife first dance would be great.
Yeah, it would be great. Yeah, it's very exciting. Let me quickly play another example. This is going to be a quick one of Astor Piazzolla. So you'll hear the difference both. I mean, you'll see the bandoneon again. The bandoneon is played sitting down typically because it's very heavy. They use the gravity to open it and close it. If you were holding it physically up, you wouldn't be able to do what you need to do with your fingers. Piazzolla played standing up famously, but put one knee up on a chair. So he's still resting the instrument on his leg, as you'll see in this video. It's a neat thing just to see if you look at his fingers, the details like how much he's moving around and how much physicality and energy there is in the playing. And then you also hear a musical difference between this and what we just heard, which is very large ensemble, very refined, totally notated and memorized, not improvised. This other one has an improvisatory feel to it, though it's not freely improvised the way jazz is. It's also a smaller group. And this is a clip of just an excerpt of Piazzolla's most famous song, or one of his most famous songs, called Adios Nonino, which he wrote as a homage to his grandfather when his grandfather died. Very passionate. And this recording, I believe, is from the 80s. It's from the Montreal Jazz Festival and shows how Piazzolla and tango kind of blend genres in lots of ways too, or move between genres. So let me do this. I'll play like a minute or two of this just to get in your ears. I think it certainly rewards hearing, and then we can have some more questions. Let me do this quickly. So again, there it is. Just gonna play like the bandoneon solo so you can see it there. it's a pretty exciting moment there too. One other quick thing I'll mention about the bandoneon, and you see this in this video where it has a bellows, right? So you can kind of manipulate the sound through volume and do vibrato and other things that you couldn't do with like a piano keyboard, for example. You see him doing that at the end where he shakes the instrument to create a vibrato sound.
You know, it's so funny. I was thinking as you were talking about Piazzolla and how he played standing up. I was the other morning playing guitar for our preschoolers, and my cord broke in the middle of it, so I had to just play without the cord, and I put my leg up on a chair, and so I was standing on one leg for a half an hour, and it's a bit of a boss move because you know, you don't think about it so much until you're doing it, but standing on one leg for a half an hour is very tiring. I found out earlier this week, and you know, was exerting much more energy than I was, certainly playing for those preschoolers. So I mean, it's quite a feat what he's doing there.
Yeah, physically, it's very physical music. There's all these famous stories about Piazzolla. There's like, I mean, he's a famous figure. There's an English language biography of him. A lot has been written about him. He's a really interesting person. He, you know, tango has a lot of like gender politics to it, right? And Latin America has gender politics. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to say about that. But Piazzolla himself said, he's like, I play standing up because that's more macho. You know, like plain sitting down wasn't like tough guy enough for him.
Right. You kind of feel that from the way that
it's very in your face. Yeah, no, this is what I'm saying. I mean, even just that little 2-minute excerpt, some people are probably gonna be like, oh my God, you know, you hear that and you notice. It's like, yes, very, very exciting.
Yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you so much for playing that for us. And I think that gives us a sense of tango and of some of the instruments that are played there. And I know we have just such a brief time together, so I was wondering if you could take us on a little bit of a musical tour of Argentina and share with us about some of the other instruments that are important in Argentinian music. And just to share with you, we're going to be hearing both the charango and the ronroco during our Shabbat evening services. But I know that there are other instruments that are also, you know, important. So if you want to share those with us and share a little bit about them and what their role is.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have some videos to play of the charango and the ronroco and stuff too, knowing that you were going to hear them to learn about it. And it's really interesting because, okay, like, you know, Argentina is in, you know, the southern cone of Latin America. It's only slightly less than 50 million people, so relatively small population wise, very large geographically, more than more than a million square miles, right? So like a third the size of the continental United States, or no, all of the United States. So very physically big, oriented north-south and wide, you know, kind of differently than the United States. I guess to cut to the chase of what you're asking, it's like, you know, like a lot of Latin American countries, it has these kind of distinct folkloric traditions that are associated with different regions of the country. Whether it is, you know, the north, which is the kind of desert area in Argentina. This is up towards Bolivia or towards Paraguay, and these spaces have certain genres that come from there. The Pampas area around the city of Buenos Aires and the provinces there have different styles. The Andean side has a different style. Patagonia has different styles. So there's really like a cornucopia of folkloric genres, all of which, you know, and people make this argument sometimes that say like tango is basically like an urban folkloric genre within Argentina, though it's also very cosmopolitan. All these different folkloric genres have been like canonized and institutionalized and are taught and are thought of as like national folklore and not just like specifically regional styles or sounds, though they're associated with these spaces in that way. Like tango and like a lot of instruments in Latin America, I mean, many of the instruments are fundamentally transnational, transcultural, like the guitar, like the Spanish guitar, the guitar as we know it here, you know, that's a colonial instrument, right? And this is a space that has been, you know, subject to colonization for more than 500 years, right? So a lot of these instruments are, you know, on the one hand, they're European instruments that have become arguably indigenous instruments in many different places. The charango and the ronroco are really interesting in particular, and I'm going to kind of highlight these just because you're going to hear them in your services, and they're very typical instruments of this area. The charango in particular. The charango is a distinctly kind of Andean instrument. People fight about where it's actually from. The Bolivians are like it's from Bolivia, and the Ecuadorians are like it's from Ecuador, and the Chileans are like it's from Chile. I think it's best to think of it as a kind of pan Latin American Andean instrument that's become a kind of very typical sound of folklore of folkloric music in Latin America in general and the Southern Cone specifically, meaning that it was developed in the Andean region and it is a unique instrument from that area, but it's incorporated into all kinds of different genres and styles, and you'll hear it in a lot of places in that way. What it is essentially a very small guitar-like instrument. It has 10 strings, though they're in 5 like double courses, like a 12-string guitar, but only 5 here. It's physically very small, and you'll see this in the video that I'm about to play, where the body of it is just like, you know, this size, quite, and people do hold it. Unlike the bandoneon or the regular guitar, it is held without a strap typically because it's light enough to just hold onto it. Traditionally, the resonator of the instrument was made of an armadillo shell. Now you'll see them made from everything from wood to plastic and everything in between. Armadillo, if you see an armadillo one now, it's actually a problem because these are like endangered species. It has metallic strings and has a very kind of bright sound to it, also because it's small. And it's interestingly tuned. It's not tuned like a guitar that goes from like the lowest string that's closest to the player to the highest string. It's more like a 5-string banjo that has the highest strings are closest to the player, and then it goes lower from there. And that allows the player to do different kinds of melodic lines and rhythmic lines at the same time. There's very distinct like strumming patterns that you'll hear in different folkloric genres, and you'll hear people do it with like finger picking, doing kind of elaborate sound that way. And it's a very, very distinct sound to it. I'm going to play, if you don't mind, Kerith, play a little excerpt of another video just so you can both see it and hear it here. And this is a video, it's really just going to be a couple seconds long, though the video goes on from there. It's the opening part of one movement from this is not really appropriate for the synagogue, but from the Misa Criolla, which is a famous folkloric inspired mass setting that the composer Ariel Ramirez, who's a famous Argentine composer who blended classical music and folkloric music together, that he wrote in the 60s. And it opens with Jaime Torres, who was a very, very famous Argentine charango player playing charango, and then he passes it on to Mercedes Sosa, who some of you may know. She was a, probably the most famous like folkloric vocalist from Latin America, certainly from Argentina of the 20th century. And so you'll see a quick clip of here too. But really, what I want you to pay attention to is just to actually physically like see what the charango is, what it looks like. Jaime Torres was a homemade instrument. It's quite amazing there, and you can see that this is not something that was made by a professional luthier, though it sounds fantastic. And you'll see you'll hear the timbre of the instrument, which again, it's hard to describe. It's very bright, but rich sounding. And then you'll hear some of the kind of typical strumming patterns that are associated with folkloric music. I'll play this quickly. Let me pour it. I'm going to pull it up so I can get straight to it. And this is one of those things where like a picture is worth 1,000 words. 1 second, this should do it. Right, that's it. So again, just like about a minute of this, maybe not even, and you can see from the video, it goes on for about 7.5 minutes, but for the sake of time, I'm gonna play just an excerpt.
damos gracias por tu hermosa gloria en las alturas.
Okay, I'm going to pause that there too, just for the sake of time. I think you see and hear the instrument there. There's a very distinctive sound. I should have said this earlier too, but the kind of cornucopia of folkloric genres in Argentina are often defined by specific rhythmic patterns, and that's what you're hearing in this particular piece too. And then the other thing to say about this example, this is clearly not folk music, right? This is classical music with a folkloric, or what is it? Is it folk music with like that's art music, or is it art music that is folk music, or is it both? And so that's important to note here too. And again, speaking to the folkloric forms, not just being the local, popular culture, but being like, fully mediated, institutionalized things too. Yeah.
Yeah, that was an amazing example. So much going on there, and definitely a sense of national identity coming through there.
Yeah.
So that was wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Sure.
And then did you want to talk about the Ronroco?
Yeah, let me talk about that too, because
Yeah.
I think that's what you're actually having someone come to play. So the ronroco is interesting. It's an instrument that's basically a big charango. Okay, though again, people get into arguments about this and fight about it and stuff. So when I say it that way, be aware of that. But it is essentially a larger charango in that it's tuned down a fifth. It has the same, otherwise has the same tuning. It's physically slightly larger, but again has 10 strings in the 5 double courses. It has the higher strings than the lower strings, and it's an instrument that was essentially how to say it. The charango is like has a deep history to it, right? And this is an example of an instrument that is a syncretic blend of European influences and indigenous influences. And the instrument comes from that, right? It is like a colonial instrument or product of the colonial experience in Latin America. The charango is, or the ronroco, excuse me, is more of an invented instrument that was actually, hear different stories from different people that, attribute it to this person or that person, but was basically developed deliberately to create a sound that would be lower and more full in folkloric, again, kind of art folkloric or modern folkloric settings. Some people are like it was invented in Bolivia, some people say in Argentina, but it's something that came from somewhere between the 60s and the 80s and is a more contemporary instrument. Though when you see it, you wouldn't necessarily know that. One thing that's interesting about it, and you can find these things and they are manufactured, professionally. That's true. I'm not seeing all the chats here. Yeah. Excuse me. The ronroco often has kind of like geometric shape to the resonating body, which is interesting, and charango does not, but you'll often see them with smooth bodies as well too. So, and that's it. And so you wouldn't necessarily know. It's one of these things that's interesting where it's like a modern traditional instrument, right? And developed in order to create this kind of fuller sound and different kinds of ensembles of this kind. I have the other film I have, or video I can show is of this, someone playing this solo. This is actually the performer Gustavo Santaolalla. Some of you may know him. He lives in LA, actually. He's one of the most famous Argentine kind of rock musicians of all time, really, really important in that world, but also has a very serious career as like a film composer. He won several Oscars. He did the soundtrack for Brokeback Mountain. He won the Oscar for that, for best film soundtrack. He does stuff for video games. He does a lot of different stuff. He does tons of stuff. And very prominent person. There was a Netflix documentary a year or two ago about Latin American rock music that he produced and is one of the main talking heads. It was called Rompen Todo, which means break everything or break it all. I forget the exact English translation they used, but he's this is not like Jaime Torres, who we just saw wearing, the poncho, playing the traditional instrument. He's a very, very famous player. He died in 2018. Gustavo Santaolalla is still with us, which is wonderful. Yeah. I'll play an example of this, and this is him just playing some of his own music on the ronroco, so you can see it and hear it. And you'll see, I think the main thing that you'll hear it's a lower sonority, and you also see that it's physically bigger, the resonating body in particular, than the charango, which, as you saw there, is just a little, quite teeny. Let me pull this up for you all, and I'll just play an excerpt of this as well. Getting it set, pardon me.
That's okay. As you're pulling it up, I'll just say, I was thinking about, I love the sound of the charango.
Mhm.
But as I was listening to it, I thought, oh, well, no wonder the guy who's playing with me, he plays both of them. But I thought, no wonder he's chosen the ronroco because I have a soprano voice.
Oh, yeah.
And it might just be too much in that same area. And the ronroco, I feel like, it makes sense depending on who's,
Yes.
singing. Whereas Mercedes Sosa, she's down in the basement. So
Right. Yeah.
sounded
Well,
great with the
that's a really
charango.
interesting thing to know. Yeah, because the charango is often above the voice in terms of like the absolute pitches where things are, and the ronroco works more as like an accompaniment instrument in that way. It
Yeah.
certainly does. So that makes sense, like musically, that it would serve that function. And it's also something that I think translates more for guitar players or people who kind of can serve more of that function than the charango does. And in the charango, when it's used in these kind of folkloric ensembles, is often like a solo instrument or the thing that's up on top of everything, where it's accompanied by lots of other stuff. And if we went back through the video that we saw of the Misa Criolla, it has like the charango player, but it has a guitar player, it has a percussionist, it has other instruments going on as well, which you would certainly hear in most instances.
You sing like an angel.
Thank you.
Yes, I believe it. Okay, let me play this one quickly, and I'll play just again an excerpt of this, but I'm happy to share it later as well. Okay. And so this is the ronroco, a very different style of playing too, as you'll hear here too, where he's not doing the strumming that we just heard before. It's more of a finger picking kind of modern contemporary style. Okay, and I'm sorry to stop that early, but I'm gonna leave it there for that too. So here again, for
Will you
those of
put the link to that in the chat?
yeah, I'll put the link for all of them in the chat in
That
just a
was
second here.
just exquisite.
Thank
Wow,
you.
what a treat.
Yeah, he's
So
amazing.
peaceful.
Yeah. Those of you who are paying strict attention to that too, or if you're a guitar player or something, you'll notice again, the strings, the highest strings are the ones that are closest or highest on the instrument, closest to his body, which is the opposite of a guitar. So the melodic part is happening with his thumb on that part, and the accompaniment is happening further down. So again, that's just a distinctive thing about that particular instrument, though you do encounter that in a lot of, these like the ukulele and other places that have these different arrangements of low and high pitches.
Yeah, that was exquisite. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
Yeah, of course.
So I know that one of the most favorite parts of these talks when we've had them in the past is when I ask scholars to share a little bit about themselves and what drew them to the music that is their area of expertise, and to share a little bit about their field work. So I'd love to
Sure.
know, what brought you into to learning about music of Argentina, tango in particular, and we'd love to hear some stories about your time in Buenos Aires.
Okay, yeah, great. I love telling those stories. Let me do. I'm putting all the links in the chat for you now, so everyone can have
Great,
them. Though they just went in reverse order, so it went from the last thing I showed to the first thing. But there
perfect.
they are. There. And any one of those figures, if you Google them or something, you'll find all kinds of amazing stuff out there. Yeah, okay. I mean, the short answer is, lots of different things brought me to it. There were things going on, kind of scholarly questions that were really interesting at the time about, economy and culture. There was a big economic crisis in 2001 in Argentina. They were kind of they were like the first very spectacular loser or on the losing end of economic globalization, basically. So that was really interesting. There was interesting policy things that were going on in terms of like cultivating culture as a resource, which is what my book is really about. Um, so there was those kinds of things. I did have a background as a musician. I was a very serious jazz musician when I was younger, and when I was in college, got into tango music because I had a friend who was like, "Oh, you like music? Like, listen to Astor Piazzolla," and it blew my mind. And we started an Astor Piazzolla cover band in Madison, Wisconsin in the 90s. And, we had to transcribe everything by ear. And we didn't have a bandoneon player. We had two saxophone players. I was the right hand of the bandoneon on alto saxophone, and we had a tenor saxophone doing the left hand of the bandoneon. So it was pretty idiosyncratic, but it was really fun. We had to rehearse for a whole year before we could play gigs, because we played like bar gigs in Wisconsin where you had to play 3 sets. And that's like a lot of music when you're listening to Piazzolla. So it took us a long time to get that much stuff. Then there was some simple things like I don't have, heritage or personal connections to Argentina. So that was not part of it. It wasn't like I was going to work with my family or people I knew or my heritage or anything like that, which a lot of people in my discipline do. Part of it was, I grew up in northern Minnesota of all places. And, part of what got me interested in international music was wanting to leave Duluth, Minnesota and, and get out and be abroad. So when I never had the chance to do study abroad when I was in college or anything. And when I was in graduate school, I was like, okay, I could either write about like avant-garde improvised music in New York City, which I really liked and wrote my master's thesis about, but I wanted to be abroad. And I was like, even if my academic career doesn't work out, I will have been able to spend time abroad, learn a different language, these kinds of things, and no one will be able to take those from me. And that's really true. I learned Spanish in order to do my research, and it just completely opened my mind in ways that I would never have been able to imagine. I'm sure those of you who are bilingual or multilingual can speak to this yourself. And then, when I got down to Argentina the first time, I got a grant to study language there from the Foreign Language Area Studies grant thing, which is done by the government. I forget which agency. Musically, what was going on down there was completely mind-blowing. It was just really, really, really exciting. Contemporary tango music is very vibrant and very interesting. Piazzolla died in 92, as I said, and a lot has happened since then. And there's a lot of amazing players. I could play another thing if you wanted of some of the more contemporary things. And all of that kind of was a perfect storm that came together and got me really interested in it. Doing field work was really fun. I mean, I can tell stories about it. One kind of fun anecdote is that they're famous for very late nights in Argentina. I mean, very late nights. So the dances would start at midnight, and the dancing wouldn't really even start till 2 a.m. And if you left, actually it was, at a friend's birthday celebration and left at 5 a.m, which for me is I'm an early to bed, early to rise kind of person. It felt outrageous to be up that late, and I offended him greatly by leaving at 5. He's like, how could you leave so early? I had to go mend fences with him the next, seriously. So a lot of that, the bohemian aspect of it was really exciting. I I did a little, I learned to play bandoneon and played in a group down there a little bit, very beginner group, at a little music school, underground music school. It was really fun. Yeah, it was a great place. Really vibrant, really open, really interesting, really complicated. And all those things came together. Yeah, I just, feels like my spiritual home down there now. I've been working there for almost 20 years now. So it's been fun. The program I do at Reed College too is a summer tango music education program. As you might hear, I mean, there's a lot of performance practice, they call it, in the musicologists call it, but basically things that a player needs to know that are not notated or ever otherwise explained to them. The famous example of this is like swing in jazz. Like if you don't know, don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing, right? And like you'll get booed off the stage if you're just reading it the way it is.
Right.
Tango's like that too. So that's partially why we do the tango program, is for people to learn some of that stuff.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, with Jewish music, I studied cantorial arts as a learned from cantorial masters and had that music handed down to me, and we don't sing a lot of it nowadays in this synagogue, unfortunately. It's more contemporary music, but that's notated as well. And if someone handed me what was written, I would have no idea how to sing it. I needed to have someone teach that to me orally as well. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Me too.
Yeah.
So we did have a question. Debbie wanted to know if you ever learned to dance tango.
Oh yeah, that's a great question. I have, yes is the answer. I've taken classes. I did it quite a bit when I was in Argentina. I'm not an active dancer now, so I know the basic steps, but didn't get bit by the tango bug. Those of you who are interested in tango, I'm sure there's a huge dance community in LA. There's big tango dance is huge. All over any medium-sized city, basically any in the world, you can find people doing tango dancing. So I learned a little bit, but I never really got to me. I mean, I don't know, that could get into some of the reasons why of that, but it certainly helps me understand the music and the kind of relationship between the dance and music, but I myself am not out tango dancing every night. Partly it's just my personality and things like that too, but I highly recommend it. It is an amazing sensation. And I think you said, Kerith, that you were going to have like a tango workshop. It's neat to just have that feeling of communicating, non-verbally with someone. It's quite amazing.
Yeah. And I love for us, especially, when we're sitting in, when we're in services, a lot of it we experience kind of intellectually. And I do like the idea of us experiencing music physically as well. And you cannot dance without experiencing the music physically. So wonderful. We did have a question from Anne here to ask if you've ever been to Moisesville.
And the answer is no. Is that
Anne, can you want to unmute yourself?
I'm so sorry I'm not on camera.
It's okay.
Sorry. I apologize. I don't know. I was kind of making a silly joke. I once went there. It's a really long bus ride. It's the Jewish community. It's like we could have ended up there if our ancestors didn't bring us here, if they got on the wrong. I don't know. I was just kind of imagining what kind of what kind of dancing they do there.
Yeah, that's a good question. And we
Pampas,
can talk.
I think it's called the Pampas. I think
the Pampas. Yeah, we can talk about that. We should. And Kerith, you talked about bringing this up a little bit. I mean, Argentina has a very large Jewish community, long-standing. I'm sure many of you know about all of this already, right? The history during World War II is like incredibly complicated there, but Argentina did welcome in Jewish refugees from Europe when the United States did not. They also welcome all the Nazis after, so it's a very, very complicated place in that regard. But they have a substantial Jewish community going back into the 19th century and even earlier, right? And this is a place that has a very deep history because colonization started, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. There's a lot of things I can say about this. There's been great books written about it. There's a book called The Jewish Gauchos, Los Gauchos Julios, that is about the 19th century Jewish rural community, which I get a sense, Anne, is partially what you're talking about. there's also a really great book about Jewish tango, which is fascinating. This guy Julio Nudler wrote this. I don't know if it's been translated into English. It's called El Tango Judío, which means the Jewish tango. And it basically traces, because tango was basically one of the first like truly transnational genres of popular music. Hawaiian music and tango actually, but like before jazz, before samba, before these other genres, right, there was tango, before World War One. And basically what happened is like tango went from Argentina when it was going into Europe, spread all throughout Europe, including into, you know, Yiddish language entertainment. A distinct kind of tango with Yiddish language tango was developed in Eastern Europe and other places. Those same artists end up going to Buenos Aires, either as immigrants or as entertainers or other things like this. And there was a moment in the 20s and 30s where you had Yiddish language tango being performed, you know, in downtown Buenos Aires for distinct, you know, Jewish audiences. It's quite an amazing story, actually.
It's totally amazing. Yeah. So just for our folks who are going to join us for services, and if you can't come in person, they will be live streamed in all the regular spaces. Our Ronroco player is Daniel Reijman, who is Jewish and from Argentina, and he'll be hanging out after services. So you're more than welcome to ask him about his experience, you know, his experiences growing up there.
Yeah.
He is an Angelino now, but I'm sure he'd be happy to share with all of you if you had questions for him as well. So,
you know, I'll say it's a hugely diverse community there, the Jewish community, right? I mean, very substantial Orthodox, ultra-Orthodox community, progressive communities, everything in between. You know, a place in which anti-Semitism exists, unfortunately, very strongly in the United States right now too, but, you know, very strongly there as well. There was the Amia bombing in the 1990s. Some of you may know about this, the Argentine-Israeli, basically not mutual aid, but just, you know, like a exchange
JCC.
association that was like a major terrorism attack. You know, so it's a very complicated place, but Argentines are all throughout the world, both because of things like large population in Israel, large population in the United States, and also a very highly educated, like middle class country, right? Where people are working in professions all over the place. So,
yeah. I can't thank you enough for joining us this evening. I do want to, we can stay on for a little while longer, but I did want to point out to everyone that that Hannah, first of all, I want to thank Hannah behind the scenes for helping us run the Zoom, etc., and that she has posted in the chat box. We are joining in just a few minutes, in just 10 minutes. So we're going to be together for 5 more minutes here, but in 10 minutes, we're going to be joining together for a Wilshire Boulevard Temple vigil in response to the horrendous shooting that we had in this country just yesterday. So please do, and thank you, Hannah, for posting that again. Please do consider jumping on to that Zoom when we finish up here, and a number of other of the Wilshire clergy are going to join me on that Zoom as well.
Yeah, I'll just say quickly about that. I mean, it's a huge tragedy, and you know, I'm glad that you all are doing the vigil and having it there. There was talk yesterday about maybe not doing this event, which would have, of course, been fine and appropriate in a lot of ways. You know, music has a healing power too, and I'm glad. I mean, I appreciate everybody being here to talk about this, and I think it will help enrich your experience over the weekend, which hopefully will be healing for everybody. But yeah, I'm also, anyway, so it's like, it felt like, whoa, is this appropriate or not appropriate to do this in the wake of a tragedy like that? But I do think, you know, hopefully this is bringing some good into the world for us too, at a time when we need it, obviously. So.
Couldn't agree with you more. And, you know, I think the other piece for us as Jewish people is that, you know, we have seen, unfortunately, tragedy after tragedy, and we just have to continue to come together in community and do the best that we can to hold each other during these times. So I just want to say, for all of you who are here, I'm incredibly grateful for you, and especially to you, Professor Luker, for sharing so much with us this evening. So does anyone have any more questions before we?
I just have one quick one. Did you ever hear, Mr. Luker, did you ever hear of Trini and Ricardo Abalon, world famous dancers from Argentina?
Yes.
Yes, Trini is my dear friend. They passed away. She used to teach calligraphy, and every birthday they would give me $50. She used to do
really?
Mrs. Reagan's makeup, and she'd always tell me how to wear my Coco Chanel makeup, my lipstick.
Hey,
Such a wonderful couple. I love them so much. May they rest in peace. They did a calligraphy in my name, so yeah, my friends.
That's wonderful that you had that connection with them. Yeah.
Thank you.
I am happy to take a few questions if anyone has it. I'm also going to put my email address in the chat. If anybody wants to get into, feel free to, if you have a question or clarification or references, feel free to get in touch with me. I would welcome that. I'm not always super quick to respond, but I'm on summer break too. So anyway, but no, please do. If, I know a lot of information has gone by real quickly. So if there's something, hey, what's that name? Or like, oh, I really like Piazzolla. What are 5 other people I should listen to? Anything like that. I'm happy to be in.
It's wonderful. I think it's been a great introduction for everybody and a really a nice kind of dipping our toe in before we're gonna, we don't do a lot of teaching during the Shabbat services. So this is a great way for people to experience this before we kind of just invite them to let it wash over them. So thank you so much for sharing with us, and to the rest of you, hope to see you on Friday, either in person or online. And I hope you can all join us in just a few minutes for our vigil. Thank you again, and have a good night, everybody. And thank you so much, Professor Luker.
Thank you. It's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Take
care.
Thank
you so much. It was really nice to come to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie.
I just saw the email right before, so I'm glad I didn't miss it.
Okay.
Me too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
I appreciate it. Bye.
Good night, folks.
Bye. Shalom. Good night.